Hello and welcome to Maastricht University Live. This is a very special edition and I'm here with a panel and we're going to talk about online education. The last few months we've actually had a lot of discussions about, well, what is online education at the moment and how will it look like in the future in September. Okay. Hello and welcome to Maastricht University Live, I guess. I can hear a lot of sounds from the studio, but that's all fine. So, hello and welcome. I'm here today to talk about online education, what we've done in the past few months and what we're going to do in the future. And we're going to discuss everything from what has happened, what we're doing as a university at the moment. I'm joined here today by a great panel of lovely people and have the lovely introduction already a little bit, but I'm joined by Professor Teun Dekker, by a second year student bachelor from Master Science program, Julia Stens, and then also someone from the online management team, Nicolai Minez? No?
Mani,
excuse me. So, yeah, that's it for today. If you have any questions for the panel, if you have any questions in general, don't hesitate to ask them in the chats. We will answer them, and some of them will even be answered live by the panel. And so we're going to start with a little video about what students have experienced in the last few months. Alrighty. What happened with that? What was that sound?
Hi everyone, I'm Misha. I'll be the tutor for today. I'm a biomedical science student.
How many more hours do you think you've been spending in front of your screen since you have switched to online education?
Okay.
I think a lot more hours, so maybe an average of 3 to 4 hours every day, just because everything is now online and you don't get any off-screen time, for example, with your tutorials.
Currently quarantining or self-isolating with my roommates in Maastricht. I live with 4 others and we've been hanging out a lot, spending a lot of time together, lots of pizzas, lots of dominoes, and basically trying to stay safe and sane during this quarantine.
Since I'm from FASOS, our lectures and such weren't recorded beforehand. There usually was only some slides being presented online. Sometimes there was an audio, but only for select courses. And now most material can be found online, and even some books and stuff which previously could be found in the library were made available for us, of course, in this select time only. I do enjoy it. There's, of course, some setbacks with the connection not working, having family or roommates also being in the house at the same time.
I do feel that PBL is not really working in some courses that I have, for example, at the moment. We are trying to keep it up, but it's very hard also understanding other people. So usually the tutor takes over the course, and I just think that PBL in some sorts of ways in courses can work, but sadly not in all.
We haven't honestly used the perfect 7-step PBL system since first year, but we have, of course, had certain discussions, and like each tutorial kind of finds their own structure and own method of doing PBL.
Now it is time to do some readings from the comfort of my own bed, because that's where we're at right now. I'm gonna watch a lecture and finish up my readings for philosophy of science.
That's a good question. I'll have to think about it. I think the most surprising effect is actually that it helps me study when I can focus most. So, of course, tutorials are at a specific time, but for example, the lectures, I can watch them when I feel like I have the time for it and when I'm most awake and most focused. So I do feel like this helps me gain more information from it than I would usually. I think it is a very futuristic way of studying.
So we're back. You just saw a video of students talking about their day and what they've been doing the last few months. And I'm here also with Julia, of course, and we're going to talk a bit about the same things. So I can imagine much has changed since March, right? So
Yeah.
maybe let's start with that one big thing, going online and doing online education, and then problem-based learning as its main thing. So how have you experienced problem-based learning?
So I think that the staff members at
UM and especially at my faculty have tried their hardest to keep problem-based learning in its core of what it's all about. My tutorial groups remained small and good sizes, and my tutors were very encouraging of us asking questions and discussing. We had certain issues with obviously internet connections because we're an international university and we have people all over the globe. Some people's internet connection wasn't as strong as others, and so we tried to keep cameras off, which maybe wasn't the most amazing thing, but our tutors always kept their cameras on, always made sure that they had a decent enough internet connection to communicate with us. They tried to stimulate learning, problem-based learning in a different format. So for example, if things got really quiet or really awkward, because obviously you're not in that face-to-face environment anymore where like the tutor can just be like, you answer the question. They would set up like sort of polls with questions, and so you wouldn't like be embarrassed to turn on your microphone and think you have the right answer and you don't, and it'd be like an anonymous thing. So I think that they did try to get a lot of student involvement, which is the core of PBL. PBL is students giving their opinions, their approaches, their ideas, their feedback, and discussing it. And so although online and not always having that face-to-face interaction kind of diminished that one aspect, I think that especially from my experience, tutors tried their utmost to try and stimulate it, to try and force it, to try and push us to remain interactive, even though things got a bit different.
Yeah. So how about lectures then, maybe? That's a different story, I suppose.
Lectures, obviously I took a number of courses, and so I had different experiences with those different courses. So the last period 5, I took 2 courses. I took a maths course and I took an interdisciplinary science and the visual arts course. And so obviously they needed 2 different ways of instructing because the content material is very different. And so that's also something important to note, that across the faculties, this whole online problem-based learning thing had to be approached differently because it's different studies and different material. So lectures, I think how they were formatted for me, at least for my one course, they had online as well as recorded lectures. And so for me, that kind of was quite motivating to have a live lecture, know that, okay, let me wake up at 8:30. I can still be in bed with my coffee and be at a lecture and just get that lecture over and done with, as opposed to like, oh, I'll do it later, let me sleep in. So it was really motivating to also like have... You have the lecture in the bottom corner and the screen sharing, but at least there's some, it's not actual interaction, but it's some sort of you get a sense of being in a live, real atmosphere almost. And yeah, I found that a lot of my lecturers tried to like incorporate videos and things. Like they really knew what they were doing with the online Blackboard, Collaborate Ultra and Zoom. They knew how to share screens and play videos, and they try to keep it pretty stimulating and interactive to motivate us to come to those 8:30 lectures. For other courses, we had only recorded lectures, and sometimes we got lecture slides and a script, and we had to like read the script, and like you would open 2 screens and you'd have to read a script of a lecture and go through lecture slides, and that was somewhat challenging.
I can imagine,
but we're all learning, and so
would you say that
trying different approaches.
Yeah, would you say that professors have gotten more creative then over the last few months in their lectures and in their tutorials?
That's a hard one. That's an interesting one. I think, for me at least, I've noticed that they've been creative in how they've tried to adapt things to online, especially because I'm doing a science program. So for our labs and stuff, obviously we can't be in the lab. And I think that the way that they try to like take practical assignments, so for example, with science and the visual arts, what we would do in the lab is, if we were there, we would be looking at pigments, looking at spectra that they provide, things like that. And because we couldn't be there and couldn't do that, they'd provide us with certain videos, and we'd get like a lecture to understand the material, and then we go and like watch those videos and then come back and discuss it. And so I think in trying to integrate things, they really did step outside their box, and I was quite impressed.
Yeah, because I've also talked to a few professors, and the video will come up in a little bit, but it was about like someone trying to make those skills lab work online. And so apparently it does work already a little
It
bit.
does work.
And it's going to go, I suppose, only better, right?
It's not the same, but it's something, and at least it keeps us on track with our studies and our timelines and our goals, and at least we're gaining information in a different way.
Yeah. So what are some more general advantages for students? I mean, I can imagine staying in bed at an 8:30 lecture is just amazing.
That is an advantage. Also, just being in sweatpants, that's great. I will not lie, that is fantastic. I think it's also, for me at least, it's stimulated. I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing, but I've been on my phone a lot more. But it's also been in terms of like connecting and communicating with peers. And so I found that really helpful and beneficial for my own learning experience, because we've now had to become more dependent on each other. So if I had issues with understanding things, I'd just call up a friend, discuss it. Do we know? Don't we know? Should we ask this one? Should we ask that one? So yeah, I think it's also forced us as students to come together and collaborate together a lot more to try and get through stuff, discuss things.
So social life has never diminished, really. Like it just moved online.
Yeah, it's been hard, but it's been doable. I mean, we've all been having Zoom parties, and we've just been having Zoom study sessions now as well.
Okay. Yeah. It's so what has changed for students who do not need to go into the classroom? What do you think is the biggest change?
I think it's really hard to remain as motivated and as disciplined and to have that daily routine. You know that you have class, let's say 1:30 to 3:30, so you're going to wake up, you're going to try either go to like sports or go start at the library early, duck into class, maybe stay at the faculty building, study there for a bit. So I think like daily habits and routines of going to class and scheduling that into your day and what you're going to schedule around that, I think that's changed a bit.
Yeah. I mean, for myself, because I'm also in my last year of my master's, so it's a bit like finding a schedule is sometimes hard, but doable, and you always find something new to do. I've really learned with a few friends how to make beers, so in smaller groups you do make something new.
It's true.
Have you learned any new skills or?
That's interesting. I've been baking a lot.
Well, that's a good one.
We have constant banana bread in my house. Constant banana bread. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, lots of baking been going on.
Nice. So before we go to a video, if you have questions still for our panel, just don't hesitate to ask them. We will try to answer them here with the people. And then I think we can go to a video about the professors and their experience. So, yeah.
The first week after the lockdown, during the transfer of face-to-face to online education, we also had to change our course books, and that was a lot of work.
What I learned from this is we can give students more extensive preparation tasks, shorten the practicals so that we can do more groups throughout the day, and then give them very intensive supervision, but very small groups. But they have to come prepared.
What we did for one of my classes, and for the other class, we switched to a setting where students need to do home experimenting. So I had them grow plants at home, and they needed to do some treatments.
Now I think I've been active on 7 different platforms for meetings, so there's no consistency whatsoever.
I heard from other tutors, excellent tutors by the way, who said they had a tutorial group where half of the students only showed them a black screen with a name. So their phone was on mute and the video was off, and you didn't know whether they were present or still in their pajama or half sleeping, because sometimes if you would address them, you also did not get a response. And that's killing. I think we really need rules that if you are in a tutorial, you're also actively present. Otherwise,
if the student didn't show up, contact the student, because you don't. You're quite worried if a student doesn't respond, especially, of course, in times of this virus, and you really hope everyone is doing well, and people's loved ones are well. And so yes, we were checking in a lot. Yeah, you also have to acknowledge that it's not the same. I mean, you, for instance, as a teacher, you don't really see a student's preparations. I mean, normally in a classroom, you can see if a student prepared because of PBL, of course. We work with problem-based learning, so students have to be very active. What you also don't see is if students are making notes. This is also something that students identified as a challenge.
Well, you really need to have students who want to do this. I mean, students who are students because they want to study. If you have students who see this, I also experienced students, I had also a project group, and they said 3 or 4 of them were really enthusiastic and it still worked for them. But the 5th student said, for me, this is difficult. It feels like an eternal holiday. I can't find motivation. I need to see other students in the library working to get into the mood. Yeah. If I sit at home and I hear noises and there's someone I can talk to, I feel isolated and unhappy and I can't work. And I heard that from some of my mentor students too. It's not a situation for everybody.
I think the mistake I sometimes see that is made is that people think like, I'm going to take my offline class and I'm just going to put that online and do everything that I was doing. I will also do it online. For instance, there's a big discussion on proctoring at the moment. So proctoring means that we check the student if they are not cheating. So I think teachers really need to redesign their education and come up with exam types, for instance, that students can do and that just don't have that cheating.
The biggest problem is that for biomedical sciences, we expect 400 students in the first year. And what I told you now, this is for small groups. I mean, to work with 8 or 10 students online is not an issue. But if you have to give, let's say, 5 practicals in a day with each 40 students, what we normally do, it's just that's not doable. So I'm not so worried about the tutorial groups, and I'm also not so worried about the lecture. That's something you get used to, but I'm worried about the practicals.
So we just saw a video of the professors and their experiences, but before we're going to talk with Professor Tim Dekker, sorry, Teun Dekker, we have a question from the chat from Melanie Vergeer. And she says, hello, as a student who will be coming to Maastricht from Canada, should I be anticipating starting the program via online correspondence or should I be proactively looking to move to Maastricht in August? And I think, Nicolai, you could answer this one?
Yeah, I'd like to answer this one. I think it's depending on the program very much, how it starts. But in essence, what we're trying to do is to establish something in Maastricht to have an on-campus experience in any of the programs that we have. So if I would be Melanie, I would say yes, I would be trying to move to Maastricht in August. And we're also aware, the whole university is aware that moving to Maastricht has implications and there are risks involved and there's talks of a second lockdown or a second wave of the virus. These are things we can't predict, but we're building all of the programs in such a way that we're doing an online variety if we need to go back to fully online, but all the other programs or all the other activities, teaching, learning activities that we have a significant on-campus element in them. So it's worth moving to Maastricht.
I think that's a very good and clear answer. Yeah. So I think, Professor Teun, that we can move to your section now. Like we've had a few questions we had a few questions for professors, and the first one was like, how has this affected you and your teaching?
It's forced us to rethink exactly what we're doing. A lot of teaching, especially in the PBL context, is very implicit. Being a tutor is, you're looking at people, you're trying to read them, you're trying to figure out what's going on in their head. You're trying to nudge them into participating. You're trying to seduce them to think a little bit more excitingly. You're doing all of this. There's a lot of very subtle reading of people going on. And oftentimes we're not even aware that we're doing that, but it's the key to having a great session. And of course, when you have to go online, you have to be much more explicit about that. You have to think very carefully, where are these students? What are they thinking? Where are they having difficulties? And how can I, well, excite them?
Yeah, yeah. So what methods do you use to excite these people then?
Bad jokes. Right? They have to be bad because, they have to sort of, bring people together. And the great thing about a bad joke is that everybody goes, that was really bad, right? Exactly. So we're, right? It's a sort of shared experience of misery that brings people together. It's very important to call people out by name.
Okay.
To do a check-in round with everybody. And to proactively ask people to jump in. And you can do that in a way that is less awkward than doing it in person. You're not quite putting people on the spot in the same way.
So would you then say every student has to have their camera on? Because you said not everyone has the camera on, but would you want that?
Ideally, yes.
Okay. And also microphones, or that has the
No, because the mute button is a mixed blessing.
Yeah.
On the one hand, it's great because it keeps the tutorial calm, and it means that people aren't sort of distracted by each other's background noise. But it also means that you have to actually push the button to say something. So there's an extra threshold that you have to overcome in order to participate. Now, that can be a good thing or a bad thing. I think in a post-discussion, it works really well. In a post-discussion, you want people to be considered and systematic and to think before they talk. So there it works well. A pre-discussion, you want people to put their feet on the table and think out loud and not self-edit. And so I think the biggest challenge that I've been facing is how do I get the pre-discussion to work in an online format?
I mean, for the students that don't know what pre-discussion, post-discussion is, in problem-based learning, of course, you have a section where you talk with each other about the questions you want to have answered for the next tutorial. And then in the pre-discussion, you do that. And in the post-discussion, you actually go over all these different methods, what you found and what you do. And I mean, from my own experience, Julia, I don't know if you have anything with that, but going online, post-discussions become these very quiet moments. And we don't even do pre-discussions anymore, I feel. But
you missed that.
Yes,
because,
I miss it.
Right? Yeah. When I moved online, initially I didn't do pre-discussions. We simply did the pre-discussions in a sort of offline asynchronous format where you had to upload learning goals and comment on them. And that really didn't work because what that did was that the post-discussion became just what were the readings about. And not how do the readings relate to the questions we formulated, and how do the questions we formulated relate to the overall structure of the course. So you have to work extremely hard as a tutor to give students a structure in which they can place the readings and the conversations that they're having in the post-discussion.
So how did you translate your offline education to an online realm? What were some of the difficult parts of that?
Well, indeed, finding that pre-discussion was an issue. Reading the room becomes an issue. Grading is agony on a screen, right? Because we're now doing everything digitally, and so you have to really read all the papers digitally and comment. The feedback is getting better because you can just type the feedback in directly. It's very tiring to read stuff online, and so much of the learning happens in the margins. So much of the exciting, stimulating bit happens in the break. So much of the fun conversations are the ones where you can recommend people books after the class, or make links, or exchange bad jokes. And that is lost, right? When we have a break, everybody turns off their camera and goes and gets more coffee. And so that is the really scary thing. So you have to work extra hard to make it comfortable and vivacious.
So besides the bad jokes, how did it make you more creative, this whole online experience?
Well, what I started to do was actually record sort of pre-discussion videos. Videos in which I introduced tasks to place what we were reading in a larger context. And that was actually exciting because you had to really anticipate. Normally, when you're in a PBL session, you can bounce off people. You can bounce off and you can sort of improvise. Whereas here, you have to be much more explicit in your planning. So you can't be quite as intuitive.
So we've now been online for a few months, right? But it was kind of abrupt how we had to go about it. So now that we have more time to restructure this whole thing over summer, what would you change for the fall semester? How would your teachers...
Find a way of doing your pre-discussions. Figure out
that's
the big
the
puzzle
one thing.
is how do I get people to think out loud?
Okay.
How do I get people to not self-edit and just blurt out whatever comes to mind?
Have you found or thought of anything already, or?
Well, these videos were an attempt to do that, to at least give some structure. I think we're trying various things on Zoom, having people sort of just force them to participate. One of the things that I did was have everybody bring, or have one person bring a newspaper article that was relevant to the discussion every time, so that they could sort of talk about that. So those are all things that you can do.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like an interesting way of going about it. I mean, luckily, there's not... In liberal arts and sciences, there's not much of skills lab involved, right? So you don't need to show things offline and have to be present in certain parts, or...
Well, we do a lot of group work.
Yeah, that's true.
And we have a think tank project in which a group of students, about 6 or 7, work for a client. And when we did that offline, a big part of that experience was we lock people in a room for 4 weeks. And we have them literally have that pressure cooker experience where they're there 8 hours a day and they work on the whiteboard and they wipe out the whiteboard and they literally camp out in their office.
Yeah.
That is a really wonderful, intense way of working that teaches students not just knowledge, but collaborative skills, interpersonal skills, international skills in the context of the international classroom. And putting that online is going to be interesting, but we started this morning, and as I said to my students, this may be weird, but it's the new weird. Yeah. And if you can work in groups in this way, you'll be very well prepared for your future.
Yeah. So I get a question from the chat. Marlieke van der Meer in Donkzicht says, what are your expectations for students to be physically attending time at the faculty classes, 20%, 30%, or 50%? I don't know who wants to answer that. I don't know if anyone has an answer to that.
Yeah, we have an answer to that. I mean, again, this differs per faculty, differs per program. And at the moment, there are factors we can't really control. So let's say we're now designing our education to be partly online, partly in the buildings. But in the buildings, obviously, there are restrictions. Restrictions of spacing that we need to have, of ventilation issues. So Julia's in a program where they use fume hoods. Previously there were 2 students allowed at a fume hood, now there's only 1. That's a 50% reduction in capacity. So what we're doing is we're looking for every single program at the moment, how much space do we have, how much can we accommodate on campus. And you said something about how do you translate your traditional offline course to an online course, but it's also about thinking about new ways of teaching the course. So it's not about translating it one-on-one per se. And also you said something about there's more time for the fall semester. I think if you make a few calls around the university and ask the teachers, that time is still very limited to redevelop and redesign courses in full. So the simple answer is we don't know exactly yet how much of your time you will spend in a building yet. But what we're doing is we're looking into exactly what Teun also said, is the implicit part of learning. What can we do to facilitate interactions outside of the classroom as well? And one of these things, during the coffee breaks you have a chat, before the class you have a chat, and afterwards. We're experimenting right now with building a virtual campus where you can actually do this, hang out before the class starts, then go to the class, and then hang out in the break and afterwards again. So that increases your online interaction. It doesn't yet increase your physical interaction. But now also we have to get creative, take students into the park, treat them to a picnic and these sort of things. So the answer is not definitive, but that will appear on every single program's website in the coming few weeks.
So you're really discussing it also with the professors, with the students, to find a solution that will work over summer and for the next year, or?
It's very much the teachers who design the education, right? So maybe there's a misconception that I'm not designing it. No one at central level is designing all the education in that sense. I mean, the people who teach in the programs, they know what works best in the programs, and I think they also know what works best for the students and how to actually attain the skills that they need and get to the knowledge, get to the learning goals. So that's why we can say we are doing it all online. I think that would be the easy way out. I think Maastricht University explicitly says we're going to rely and trust the teachers to find a new way of teaching and coming up with innovative solutions for this university. We're a young university, so we kind of think that we can make something special work.
Okay.
And we have to think, what can be done online in a sensible way, and how can you make the most of the limited amount of in-person time that you have? Lectures, I mean, why didn't we put them online years ago? I mean, right? You don't have to physically be there for the lecture. I mean, it can be nicer, and it's certainly nicer to give a lecture to a group of people that give you energy rather than staring at a screen where you think, what are you, an audience or an oil painting? I don't know the difference. But right, I don't think you lose very much when you put the lectures online. So that gives you space to use the limited capacity that we have in the most high impact way.
Yeah. But wouldn't you say that when people don't go to lectures physically anymore, that you lose an essential part of education then?
What would that be?
Well, the part of being there and actually listening and physically partaking, because I at least notice, I don't know if you have the same, but like I really go to my phone real quickly when I'm on an online lecture.
Yes, but you also go to your phone really quickly in an in-person lecture.
That's true.
It feels a lot worse to do that. You're right.
I think like for me, I try to be a regular lecture goer because, as you're saying, from a teacher point of view, from a professor point of view, it's nice to have energy and to have an audience to talk to, and like I think maybe for you as well, like students who go to lectures regularly, we also kind of rely on that environment to help and stimulate our learning, to be there to kind of force us to engage with the material. So I think it's also a two-way street. But I do agree in if we're putting priority on, do we focus on getting lectures back in or tutorials? I would also say tutorials is where the real magic happens.
Exactly right. I mean, there's this wonderful scene in the movie Good Will Hunting, where Good Will Hunting says, there's nothing that they teach at university that you can't learn for 10 euros in late fees at your local library.
That's true. Good point.
And that's true. The thing is, you probably won't. Yeah. You could read all the books by yourself because, hey, they come from American publishers and the lectures are on YouTube and one hears these rumors about Russian websites. Right? You could read them all by yourself, but you're probably not going to. Right? After a chapter or two, you're just going to give up. So our core competence as university is getting people in the mood for learning. Yeah. Right? Getting them in an environment in which they will persevere when the learning gets difficult. Yeah. And I think our chief tool there is relationships. Yeah. Right? Why do you go to the lecture? Partially because, you want to be at the lecture, but also because you meet your friends afterwards. And, and even if the lecture is boring, you think, I'll just go because then I can meet my friends afterwards. Yeah. Right? Why do you prepare for a seminar? Because if you don't, you'll look foolish to the attractive person sitting opposite you. Right? Yeah. Why do you work on your paper X hours extra to make it really good? Because, a well-respected teacher giving you a compliment actually feels good. Right? So in a way, inspiration is our core business. And what we have to think about is, how do we do that in a constrained environment?
Yeah. So before we go to another video, because we have to move on to the next section as well, Laura Neville says, hi, as a student beginning a one-year master program, what effect could the online learning platform have on conducting experiments for a thesis? I have an answer to that one, but maybe someone else also has one.
You're a one-year master student.
I'm a one-year master student, exactly. So I'm doing interviews and a Q methodology, which is actually really doable by just translating it online. We're not allowed to use Zoom, of course. We have a more secure platform for interviews, but the Q methodology is something that you could do online any single time. So I don't see the problems or the study delay that could occur because I don't have issues with that yet. So I don't know if anyone...
anything, right, it makes it easier because everybody's at home, so they have nothing to do. So you don't have to go visit them. You can just Zoom them up in person, virtually.
It really saves a lot of time in that sense.
It saves a lot of time. I mean, obviously, when you're dealing with the science experiment,
that's different.
How has that been for you with lab work?
So for our labs, they've tried really hard to prevent a study delay and tried to make labs online. Obviously, that's not possible with all labs, and so for those, they've kind of altered the lab. So for example, if you applied to do something in your lab in experimental physics, you can't exactly be playing around with all the tools and equipment you'd have in a physics lab. And so they changed the whole lab completely to something else similar that could be done online. Again, like as I mentioned, for me, they just try to take the lab and adapt it to an online environment, making it more watch videos, look at databases, stuff like that. I know from a couple of my friends who are going into theses or just from discussions, because obviously for us, a dedicated semester at MSP, it's again for undergrad, but is just to complete your thesis. We have one semester, 30 credits to do your thesis, and that was going into a lab, going and running your experiments and writing up on that. And so I know that what they've done now is they've gone to theoretical theses. So in terms of, rather than running experiments and writing up on that, you have to do it more on theoretical, more literature review type thing. And that's also come into play again with project period. An essential part of MSP is when we have our 4 weeks, we go out, we conduct research. It's really cool, really exciting. And yeah, they've tried to make it again theoretical, online, interesting, creative ways, watching YouTube videos to see things. So it's different. It's now more theoretically based than experimental based, but at least you can do a thesis.
And the science of baking, of course.
And the science of baking.
Exactly.
So we're actually going to see a video in a bit now about the future of learning, which is actually a little bit tying into that whole thing. And then we'll be back for the last part of this live stream. So, yeah.
Mijn naam is Jaap Heukelom en ik werk voor IMED. Wij zijn de oprichters van IMED, Vincent Graham en ik. Nou ja, in coronatijd is natuurlijk alles gestopt in de zin van dat geen mensen meer bij elkaar mochten zijn in het onderwijs. Praktijkonderwijs is natuurlijk het zwaarst getroffen, want dat kan je dus op geen enkele manier vervangen. En dit is een soort, het is niet een echte vervanging, maar het zorgt wel dat een heleboel delen van dat onderwijs, praktijkonderwijs, wel door kunnen gaan. Het doel is om studenten thuis mee te kunnen laten kijken naar de activiteiten, de procedure van de chirurg. Starten bij anatomie. En als je dus thuis via een heel netwerk gestreamd dat mee kan kijken, met Zoom bijvoorbeeld, dan heb je natuurlijk, dan zit je live mee te kijken. Nou, eerst een anatomieoperatie, maar later willen we dat ook gewoon doen voor echte operaties. Eerst in 2D, maar 3D is ook al mogelijk. Daar zijn we al mee aan het testen, zodat je dus thuis ook 3D mee kan kijken naar een operatie. Ja, ik zie dat als een enorme kwaliteitsverbetering ook. Want in dit geval chirurgie-studenten kunnen veel meer en vaker meekijken bij de operaties. Nu moeten ze op een kluitje echt om een patiënt heen staan om een klein beetje wat te zien. Ja, dat kan je allemaal hiermee ondervangen. Wil je dan ook vragen kunnen stellen. Dat moeten we ook nog even testen, dat je dus ook interactief die chirurg vragen kan stellen terwijl die bezig is.
So we just saw a video of the future of education, and we've been talking about what has happened from March until now. And so maybe it's also good to look at the future from September onwards, and that's why I'm joined by Nikolai. You're from the program manager from online education, so you have a vision of the future in that sense, or at least to a certain degree. So can you tell us what students can expect in September?
I can only partly tell you what students can expect in September, because this is what we're working on very hard right now, and this is also the point that I made about being pressed for time. Obviously, we have to really think through what we want to teach students, and that's the biggest challenge that teachers are now facing. Most teachers are developing courses for period 1, and the thing was that in March we had to take the whole thing online, and that was challenging, but at least the parameters were clear. It has to be online. Now we think that we can do some sort of a hybrid version where we say what we have to do, we'll do that online. What we can do, we'll do it on campus. And we're trying to find a nice balance between the two and navigate the parameters that we have in terms of buildings, in terms of capacity, also in terms of staff, because even if you split a group of 12 students in half, you're going to need double the time to teach them in 2 sessions, or the interaction is going to be shorter. So I think there's this question will only be answered in September, but in the meantime, while we're making the blueprints, everyone's really getting creative and trying to make sure that there is enough face-to-face time, that the interactions on campus are meaningful. And that means for some programs doing what they've always been doing, which is nurturing socialization and interaction, social activities outside the classroom. And some programs have to sort of step that up and explore that area and go beyond the more traditional ways of teaching and having student-teacher interaction. So that it's an exciting time. But I don't hold the vision of the future in that sense. What I do is I bring the visions together and then measure them with what's technologically possible. There's a bunch of privacy issues and security issues that we have to take into account. We don't have unlimited building space, etc. So that's what I'm trying to bring together.
Yeah. So earlier we already had a question similar, but for people that just joined, like, should students come to Maastricht? What is your resounding answer to?
Well, I think anyone should always come to Maastricht. That's my answer, because it's just a nice town. And what Teun already said, for the people who missed it, but it's university adds something to the whole college experience. So I do believe that you can take a program and you can do a program online, and you could even perhaps finish a whole bachelor's or a whole master's by doing online courses. But there are other aspects of studying that you will only really truly experience if you go physically on a campus and interact with people and feel the environment. And now I think that almost 100% of the people who actually went to college will tell you that it was an interesting time, it was an amazing time, it was something they learned so much, but also outside the classroom. And I think that whole on-campus experience, that's something that is very important. So that's what we're trying to do, is to really get that back to the fullest extent within all the limitations that we have at the moment.
Yeah. So in the chat, there's actually a question now from Katinka. She asks, is there a priority for example, first-year bachelor or master students in real-life contact on campus?
What I can tell you at the moment is I've looked at all the plans of the faculties and the programs, and there is an emphasis on the newcomers. So everyone who's new in Maastricht, so that means also first-year master students, but also especially the bachelor students, they will sort of get priority over the students who are already kind of familiar with their building, with their city, with their fellow students. And the reason is if you have 200 or 300 or even 20 students that don't know each other and they have to go online and be a community and make this work, which is essentially the Maastricht University model of education. Small groups, a lot of individual attention, a lot of interaction. If you have to do this with people you don't know, this is fairly difficult. It's not impossible, but it's difficult. So what we do is we make use of the experience that our second and third year students already have, and our second year master students, and we kind of give priority to the ones who don't yet. So we can take them on this journey and teach them.
So when should students come to Maastricht then? As soon as possible, or in August? Or?
Well, this is students we're talking. So the academic year starts on September 1st. There is an introduction the week before that. I think most people arrive somewhere in the second half of August. But yeah, I don't. Whatever your travel restrictions allow you to do, I don't think there's a rule for this in the offline world. So I wouldn't say there's a rule for this in the new world either. Yeah.
Yeah. So in the chat there's a question now from Nikki Nijkerk. Hello, can you already say something about the exchange program next year, global health program? Is there still a possibility this will take place?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. For the global health program, I don't know by heart, but the general rule is, I mean, we are a very international university. Internationalization is one of the most important tenets of this place, right? So we encourage everyone to go abroad, and we encourage people to actually come to us and study with us. So we're doing everything that we can to make sure that everyone can go on a semester abroad, but this is the whole world at the moment is a code orange or a code red, which makes it fairly difficult to say it's safe to go, it's safe to come here. But we're looking at this really day by day, and at the moment it looks like these mobility programs can still take place. But I cannot look this far in the future and give guarantees on this, but it's our intention at least to make these mobility programs work.
Yeah. So when students come here in Maastricht, right, there's of course the studying aspect, but also the socializing aspect. And I think we've heard already a few things, but like, what is the things you're trying to do to make the social experience still possible even now?
I think we are discovering this because we haven't been in this situation before. The last or the previous semester, everyone was at home in bed in sweatpants. So this is the socializing experience was Zooming and doing house party and these sort of things. We're looking into doing small scale social activities right now that we can maybe do in the fall, and this means going outside with people. And some programs already do this, so it comes natural to them. There are bachelor programs that take groups of students outside, even in the park or in the parking lot, and do experiential learning programs with them to get to know each other. It's these sort of things that work already, say, in a healthy world, that we think we can take those the things that we've learned there, we can take them into the new reality as well. But Maastricht is a city where you have to make it happen yourself, you know. So social life is something that is very much constructed by the students, and this depends on the availability of bars, the availability of the park, the weather, etc. If these sort of align, if the stars align for Maastricht's culinary and nightlife, then I think we're more or less good. If not, and everything closes down again, yeah, then we can sit in the park perhaps, but that's it. And at the same time, you're asking what we are designing or doing, perhaps to facilitate this. We are more on the facilitation side, but we're not the ones who are designing social life for students per se, right? That's very much up to the student associations, and I think typical for Maastricht, students themselves who find a way. Yeah.
So first year students, of course, may need some more guidance, and I know that you say like social life, you make it yourself. That's very clear. But like, are there any facilities that you can provide first year students, especially, with to give them something extra?
That's a good question. What we're looking into is if we can open up extra buildings, and then we're talking perhaps big conference halls that are now not being used, but also pop-up locations throughout the city. In the inner city, we have a beautiful, nice little city that you can navigate around walking or cycling. So for us, it's fairly easy, I would say, to open up locations where, with the limited amount of people, you could do something socially. So we're looking into that, you know, but basically colonizing the city a little bit and taking vacant buildings and seeing if we can use them for this specific purpose. Because if we can't teach in them, perhaps we can do something social in them. Bake banana bread, make some beer. We don't know, but yes, also very much on the agenda.
Okay, so what are some of the challenges you still face for the fall?
There are more challenges than certainties at this moment. But one of the big challenges at the moment is public transportation. And public transportation rules dictate at the moment that we can only teach classes between 11 and 3. And if we can only teach 11 and 3 on campus, that is, that makes it fairly difficult to spread throughout the day. So that's one of the things that we're optimistic about, that we can spread because we are Maastricht, because we are a small town. It's easy to navigate around, and not everyone has to use public transport to get to faculties. Actually, I think the majority of people doesn't take a bus. People walk, yeah. And there are people who come by train and by bus, and if we can facilitate them and perhaps spread this flow a little bit, then I'm very hopeful we can spread it out through the day. So that's one of the big things, the public transportation. And another thing is, again, it's the buildings, so it's the capacity of the buildings. And I've been involved in kind of redesigning how a building is used, and you get one-way streets through corridors, and people want to go to the bathroom, but that's 5 meters back, but it's a one-way street, so you're going to have to walk around the whole building to get to the bathroom. But it's these things that and we have to do this in all these ancient buildings that we have, and we have to find new routes through them. So those are challenges, but there's a whole list, but they're interesting to navigate, at least. Yeah.
So maybe we're getting to the end of this now. Maybe some closing thoughts from everyone here. Like, how is the future going to look? I'm hearing a lot of positive things as well. I think that everything is going to work out in a very great way. But do you have any closing remarks maybe before we end the live stream?
Yeah, I think what we need to keep in mind, at least for now, is that we're in a temporary situation. So what we're trying to do right now and what we're trying to fix right now is not something that needs to be how we are doing things in the long term. Because we are pressed for time. We have to improvise, and there's very little time to reconceptualize what higher education is and then put it online. Plus, we've never tested it. So we've never tested the hybrid classroom or only on a very limited scale. And when I look at this video that we just saw with putting on glasses and doing an anatomy class, this has been around in education for a long time, this sort of stuff. Pilots train in simulation simulators all the time. So I think we're more and more moving in the direction of digitization. But what we're going to do the next year is explore and discover new ways of enriching traditional higher education with possibilities from the online realm, rather than replacing one with the other. That's at least where I think we're standing right now.
Yeah. Before we move on, we still have a question from the chat actually. Sarah says, hey, as a new student, I'm concerned about having online classes. Isn't it harder for us since we still didn't find new friends to ask or communicate with? Are there any planned opportunities for the new students to get to know each other? I mean, maybe you can start.
Well, as far as I know, that there are plans for some sort of a small scale INCOM to take place, and INCOM is kind of the introduction welcome to uni party that happens. Yeah. I don't know if you know more about if that is happening, how it's happening, but I have heard that there are plans to take that into account. As far as I know, and we've heard it from our professors, from staff of the online education, that for the university it is of high priority for people coming to Maastricht, for people in Maastricht as students to have a social life and to discuss and engage. And so it's important to know that they are trying and they are understanding to try and make it as nice and as easy and useful as possible. I do understand it is a bit scary and intimidating to meet people for the first time in classes on a camera behind a screen. But I think it's also, it would be a similar sensation coming to university here. I didn't come here with any friends from home or anything. And also the first couple of days, you don't know anyone, you've never met any of these people. And so it's still going to be that experience just through a screen. And so there are planned programs to have interaction. And at the moment, the city of Maastricht our lockdown has been quite mild, and we are at a really low stage, and social life is happening here in a different way, in the new way, in signing forms to how long you'll remain in a coffee shop, but you can still message someone who seems to know answers on your Zoom tutorial and say, hey, I'm really struggling with this, would you mind going to Mickey Brown's, and we can spend 30 minutes there and discuss it. So I think that there are plans to help you guys meet each other, but it is also going to be that same awkward couple of weeks when you meet people instead of face to face. It's just through a screen.
It's great that you always have the names of everybody in the Zoom, right? You don't actually have to memorize the names
exactly.
anymore. It's really very helpful,
true.
actually.
It's
you
very
can look
true.
like you memorize all the names. It's fantastic.
You can always ask people for their numbers. Do you know, to be that awkward, oh, can I have your number? You know?
Yeah, exactly.
So what's your name? What's your number? Can I add you to the group? You know, you can just be oh yeah, we've got to do this project together.
It's getting a lot easier in that sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's also another question still from Elena. I will start my master's program in biomedicine in September. Will the practical courses take place as usual? I think we've discussed enough of this, saying it's all under construction right at this moment, right? So we can't give you a concrete answer to this one yet, but there will be mails sent out, I think, this week.
The program websites will be updated in the coming weeks, and this is a very specific question, so I would say, Elena, ask the people at the admissions office or the marketing people at that specific program that question. It's good to know, though, some of these things, as Julia said, some programs can be flexible and skills labs can be moved around a little bit. Some things are not that flexible. So we're still looking into programs that, for instance, learn how to wash your hands in a medicine program. This has to be somewhere at the start of the program, can't be at the end of year 3. So that's something that we're really trying to figure out still. So in this,
I mean, it's clear that if you have any specific questions for your faculty, then just go to that faculty and ask them there. But we will have answers for that. Well, I think that we're at the end of it, basically. So what we've learned from the last hour is that student experience is still very positive, I'd say. That there is still a lot of conversations going on. There is still a lot of partying going on. Professors have moved on to a fantastic, a bad joke attitude, but
whatever it takes.
Whatever it takes to get online. And that even though there are challenges still for the future, that the future will be bright and that we will have a proper solution to the issues that we have nowadays. So that rests me to thank my panel, because it was a great conversation, and also a goodbye from my side, because I will not be joining for any more of these live streams, because this is my master, this is my 1-year master. So if you can't get enough of me, I make music and it's on Spotify under Dex and Steve. But like that was a thing that I had to plug from my old coordinator. But other than that, thank you very much for joining. Thank you all, and I wish you a great day. Yeah, bye.